In this video, we're going to be taking a look at temporary representation. This is a phrase I've been seeing floating around a lot recently, and I kind of wanted to explore it a little bit and then at the end give my 2 cents on what I feel temporary representation is or isn't. And as ever, I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comment section down below. So I think the most important thing is to ask, what is temporary representation in the first place? And I kind of feel it stems a lot from when characters are changed in an adaptation from their original medium. So for example, when characters are gender or race swapped, or when you have a character who their sexuality has changed in the new version compared to the old version. And though I'm not going to get specifically into race and gender swapping and all that in this video, that is sort of the basis in which temporary representation works off of. And there are kind of a couple ways you can look at temporary representation, taking it from 2 different types of character standpoints. So the first kind is of Disney characters who obviously have a history of never really changing. The Disney animations happened, and that is how that character will always be perceived, bar the fact that obviously live action and stage musical versions of characters have and are happening. And then secondly, you have comic book characters in which they are constantly being remade, rebooted, different versions are up and around left, right and center. You have comics, you have cartoons, you have films, you have video games. Like, it's an ever-changing landscape for how these characters are presented. Thus far, when it comes to specifically Disney and their live action films, the live action films have kind of only lasted as long as the lifeblood of that film being out either in cinema or when it hits home release or onto Disney Plus streaming. After that sort of buzz dies down, they kind of fade away, right? And even though the likes of Aladdin, Mulan, and to an extent The Lion King have brought better on-screen representation, they are prime examples of ones that have sort of faded away. I mean, how many of you still talk about Mena Massoud's Aladdin, Naomi Scott's Jasmine, Will Smith's Genie, Donald Glover's Simba, Beyonce's Nala, even Emma Watson as Belle? Not many of us, right? And so that kind of really begs the question of, will Halle Bailey's Ariel stand that test of time as well? And kind of everything I've laid out so far, no is the answer. And so I'm going to leave that there just for now in that little bubble and take us across to the comic book landscape, where obviously things, as I said, are changing all of the time. And because of that constant change, we were able to get such films as Spider-Man No Way Home. Now, I know that this was kind of a very standalone thing. We've never had anything like that before. Hopefully, the way the rest of the MCU's multiversal saga expands, we will get more crossovers with the Fox and Sony properties. It's likely to happen because the comic book landscape has changed and has adapted in such a way to essentially stay somewhat relevant. I know that that's not necessarily, you get what I mean though, right? Please tell me you do. I mean, we've ended up with characters such as Sam Wilson taking on the Captain America mantle, and then Miles Morales. And I think Miles Morales is really someone who has stood that test of temporary representation. I mean, he definitely could have perceived, and definitely is still perceived, as just a version of Spider-Man who is half black, half Latino with a few extra powers, right? And that's kind of it. Does he really stand outside of Peter Parker? Well, I think the answer now is yes. Like, Miles has really extended out of the comics. He's in cartoons, he's in film, he's in video games. He had his own video game not too long ago. So I think there is definitely scope for these characters who are deemed to be temporary representation to actually establish themselves and be their own. Now, it certainly helps that Miles is an original character. He has that going against live action remakes in the Disney pantheon. But is he in a way a little window into what can happen? Now I'm going to take us like completely out of the realm of film to establish this next point, and I'm going to take us into the theatre world. I've already mentioned stage musicals of Disney films, and I'll get to them in a bit, but what I first want to talk about is how that in theatre every year across the globe, multiple versions of multiple characters are being staged at the same time. Yes, theatre operates very differently to film. There isn't just one person at the top of it, one sort of monopoly in it that is governing which films, which shows, sorry, are being made and being put on. Obviously, an artistic director at one theatre can put on the same show as an artistic director at another theatre, and it really doesn't matter. In fact, in London last year, 2 big theatres, Shakespeare's Globe Theatre and the National Theatre, both were showing Much Ado About Nothing at the same time. And this is something I really want to touch on because Shakespeare has stood the test of time over 400 years. And the only way they do that is to be put on not just constantly, but in different ways. And if they're not put on in different ways, then they aren't going to last as long as they have. And I know that for so many people that the Disney animated films in comparison to Shakespeare plays hold a deeper part in your heart, right? Because it's a nostalgia. It's something you grew up with. We didn't grow up 400 years ago with Shakespeare's plays when they were first coming out. I don't know, maybe some of you did. Whoa, have you discovered the secret to time travel? But finding new and different ways to tell these stories of what kept Shakespeare's plays alive. So for Disney to find new ways in order to tell their stories, that's what's keeping them alive, and of course keeping money in their bank. And so now I come to Disney's stage musicals, because then that is again a way that they've kept them alive, right? The Lion King, Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, Frozen, to name but a few, are just alive and kicking on stage musicals, and we can all accept that they work as a separate being alongside the Disney animated films. But then when it comes to the live action films, we carry a different thought process. And I wonder why that is. I don't think there's a real factual way to explain it. I think it's only ever opinion based. And so if you have an opinion as to why we treat the live action films different to the stage musicals, let me know in the comment section down below. I mean, either way, both the stage musicals and the live action films will always be second fiddle to Disney animated films. I feel that that is just the way it is. So bringing us back round then to overall what this video is about, Halle Bailey's The Little Mermaid will occupy the limelight come May 26th. She will be everywhere. We won't be able to turn without someone talking about The Little Mermaid. How long is that going to last? How long will she last as Ariel before Disney return to the 1989 version? I argue kind of doesn't really matter. I think the impact will determine the longevity. I don't think that that means how long will she last on the top of the banner on the Disney Plus homepage. How long will her dolls be in the shops over the 1989 version? No, I think it depends on the people that are growing up watching her as their Ariel for the first time. I think they are the people who will determine how long this representation lasts. And really, with that in mind, it can last forever. And if you think, no, people are just going to move on, it won't have that impact. I mean, look at Encanto. Look at the way Encanto moved in and kind of really took the space away from the likes of Coco and In the Heights. But do Coco and In the Heights have any less of a cultural impact than Encanto? Well, yeah, maybe, but you know what I mean? They have their own cultural impact that has definitely lasted. I'm a Coco boy through and through. You feel me? And so therefore, I think the answer to temporary representation isn't in the studio's longevity of that product, but in the people who are represented by it, and the people who are connected to those characters. And I think that for us to think that there can only be one version of a character at one time, and that is that, we're limiting ourselves, really. There is space for both of the Ariels to exist at the same time and for everybody to feel represented by them. So now I throw it over to you. Let me know in the comment section down below, is temporary representation actually a thing? And if it is a thing, is it a good thing, or is it a bad thing, or is it a who really cares kind of thing? Let me know in the comment section down below. No doubt your comments are going to be hella interesting to read. So bring it on, I suppose. If you want to see more videos from me, you can check them out just here. Don't forget to subscribe if you enjoyed this video and you want more, turning on that bell notification. Until next time, Hakuna MaChatter.